Biomicrobics BioBarrier. The future of septics? I doubt it. So I just want to talk a little bit about these BioBarrier systems. And before I start though, I want to do a disclaimer. What I'm going to talk about is my opinion. Even though my opinion is fact, I have to state that it's an opinion for legal reasons. You know how people are. A lot of people don't like that these are considered a junk system, and they will fight tooth and nail to try to protect it. But my opinion, and that's based on fact, is that these are junk systems, and my opinion is shared by a lot of people that used to install these, and a lot of homeowners. So let's take a look in these. Okay, so how these systems work. This is two separate systems here. All four of these tanks make up two separate systems. This is your trash tank. This is the first tank that the sewer from the house would exit into. It would drop into there, and then it would come out of there and go into your second tank. And so I've actually got some footage of one of these. I don't know which one it is, but I've got some footage of one of them, what it looks like when it fails, which I will play right now. So that was quite a mess. That was last winter. We were just pumping it for the guy. He knew it was failing. He was going to get it replaced, so we just had to keep pumping it just to be able to live in his house. Just had to keep pumping it to try to avoid it pumping all that sewage on the ground. But as you saw, it was going to do it no matter what, because, you know, this is, I think that's about 1,000 gallons, and that's about 500 gallons. So 1,500 gallons, how long is that going to last between pumping? It's not very long. People use a lot of water, especially people that are home a lot. But let's take a look at these, and we'll look at the insides. All right, this one's kind of falling apart. We'll go to this one. Okay, so this is the first tank. This is where the inlet would be. The pipe is missing, but not a big deal. And then this is the outlet for this tank. It's a T with a screening system in it. Biomicrobics. So this tank is supposed to try to catch most of the large particles and just keep them in here and hold them, and then most of the clear waters would go through the screening system and out to the secondary tank. Oh, I feel like I'm gonna fall down. All right, so after the trash tank, it would drop into here, and this is just a large tank on this side at least. Then over here, this is called a bioreactor. I'm sure that is proprietary. Let me jump over to the other tank, you can see it better. All right, so the bioreactor. How does this thing work? So if you look in here, you can kind of see all these little plates. Those are the membrane. It's called a membrane system. I don't know if that's like I don't even know if that's a proper term. What it resembles to me is a fixed film system, which that's really not. I suppose no one would really know too much about that, because those are typically in small scale sewer plants. But so I'll just explain how this is. On that membrane is living bacteria, and your effluent, the sewer water in here, is supposed to go into that bacteria and be processed and come out the bacteria as clear water. Alright, so over here, this is just a little pump, and when this pump turns on via the control panel, which that's what this is all about, it would run out, and it's been cut off, but there would have been a control panel on the other end that would tell it when to turn on and off. I think it just uses floats. But okay, so that would turn on, and it would pull the effluent down. So this is all open on the top. It would pull the effluent down through the media. The media would do its job, and then it would send the effluent out through this, and then this would come up and terminate to the ground somewhere. And it's supposed to put out completely drinkable water And so the advantage to this over, well, the alleged advantage to this over an aeration system, they've been around for a long time, and they put out clean drinkable water too, except for they have one more step after this. They have to be chlorinated. And the problem with aerations is people don't keep up on the chlorine. So what I see as this thing is kind of like the space race. One company wanted to be there first, and they put this piece of junk out, and it's got a lot of problems. There's a lot of theories on why it doesn't work, but let me get more into explaining how this works. So this pipe here, it's been cut off, but it would exit the tank, and that goes to a blower or compressor. So it would be pushing air down through that. The air would go into the bottom of the bioreactor and push air in, and then the air would push up. And what that would do, it would do two things. It would feed the bacteria on those plates, and it would keep all the sludge and sediment from settling inside this filter and ruining it. But now this is where the theory on why these don't work comes in. I've been told that these were very poorly manufactured and they tear. I'm inclined to believe that, but I've also been told that these are extremely sensitive. So if you do laundry, clean your toilet with bleach, use too much soap in the shower, you would kill all this. So they're probably both viable theories, and either one of them could be the reason why, and you know, it could be a combination of both that are causing these to fail. So let's see, where was I going? So supposedly this whole reactor right here costs $6,000. I think that's inflated, and for as easy as these are to ruin, whether by the air going through there and agitating it and causing turbulence and the turbulence tearing it up, or soap and bleach coming in here and killing the bacteria, that's a huge price tag to pay for that piece. And we'll get more into the money, because $6,000 is only a part of it. I think this is just a vent right here. I'm not sure. Let me pause this. In my opinion on how these could be a useful system, but you know, as they sit right now, they're garbage. But so if there was a different way to manufacture these where the tearing apart of the membrane wasn't an issue, and the only issue was just the bacteria on there dying, I think that it could be made to work. And in my opinion, the way to do it would be to convert this entire chamber, not the bioreactor, but this entire tank, into a aerator system. So what I would do is, over on this side, I would add an aerator right in here. Have a big diffuser in the bottom, or multiple diffusers around the perimeter. But then by doing that, you aerate this and you turn it into an aeration system too. And then you would have aerobic bacteria in there that I feel would do the job of breaking down bleach and soap before it ever gets to the bioreactor over on the other side. But at that point, what would even be the purpose of this? You know, you would, the whole thing about this is you're trying to eliminate cost, and but I think that would help. But back to the money though. So the money, that's kind of a big deal with these. As these systems were put in with their control panels, they were put in for around $21,000. Now that's a lot of money. But and when you compare these to an aeration system, just a typical aeration system, you're looking at maybe $7,000. Maybe if it's a really bad job and there's a lot of obstacles, and maybe you'd have to have a lift station or something, it could go up near $12,000. But you know, and I think that's where the problem is. Now, supposedly there's lawsuits going on. I haven't heard too much about them. I think they're just rumors, but supposedly the guy that put these in is the focus of these lawsuits. And it's not about these systems, because these systems, they are approved by the state of Illinois. You know, whether there's more to that, I mean, you guys know how Springfield works. Something might not really work, and you could get it passed some way. I don't really know how, but I hear that they can do stuff like that. But anyway, this system, it's approved for Illinois, and it's been inspected. So I don't think anyone could have a lawsuit against the system itself, but the issue I have with these, so they were put in for $21,000, and the way that they were sold to the end user, the customer, they were sold as being the only thing that you could ever put in a yard. You can't put in a conventional, which that's true because, you know, they're swamps or something, but you couldn't put in an aeration. Well, these are sitting here in my lot, obviously not in the ground anymore, and what were they replaced with? Aeration units. So they could have an aeration in the yards that these were taken out of. So to me, that's just really dishonest, and I believe that's deceptive. So maybe what someone could sue for, if you know, if they wanted to, they could possibly sue for the deception, because to tell someone that they can't have an aeration system when they can, and sell them this brand new system that's slightly proven, in my opinion completely unproven, but you know, the state says otherwise. But to sell someone something like this, I believe that's where the lawsuit would come into play. And I don't think that you could ever sue for the entire cost. Like, so you put this in for $21,000. I don't think you could sue for $21,000. But what I do think you could sue for is the difference. So say you had this pulled out and an aeration went in there and the cost was $7,000. I think you could sue for the difference between 7 and 21, which is $14,000. I think that you could possibly sue for that. But so another issue with these is the cost to maintain. So one of these, I don't know which one, but the lady was paying $1,200 a month just to try to keep it going, and she did that for about a year. That's a lot of money to put into something. You know, every time the installer came out to look at it, he charged $500, and every time there was a problem, it was your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault. Never the installer's fault. Which that's, you know, it's debatable. I mean, it should have never gone in, but buyer beware, possibly. I don't know. It's a tough situation. I think one of the worst things about this system is not the system itself. I think it's the world that we live in, where it makes people afraid to talk about junk systems like this. Because people think if they say something bad about this system, or the person that sold it to them, then they're going to be guilty of something. And you're not. As long as you're telling the truth and you've got facts to back things up, you are completely fine. You might get a cease and desist order, but cease and desist orders are not something to worry about. That's typically just desperation. That's someone desperate to shut you up. And I've got them before. They're not a big deal. If someone was so upset about something you did or said, they would give you a lawsuit immediately. There wouldn't be a cease and desist order. But enough about that. I think what I'm going to do with this video next is I'm going to pull one of these out and I'm going to take it apart. I don't know when I'm going to do that. It might be 2 months from now, but for right now, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to kind of save this footage. So until tomorrow or 2 months from now, I don't know. All right, so I got the bioreactor out. I hosed it down pretty good because I didn't want to get a bunch of sewage all over my shop, because this is all brand new concrete. Look at all this. Made myself a rolling workbench. But anyway, so I was looking at all the film I had shot previously on this last night. I was trying to start the editing process, and I realized there was a few things that I missed. So I was talking about how this thing, how it's sensitive, either the air tears it up or you kill it with soap. Well, there is another way that it dies too that I failed to mention, and a lot of us know about it. So these can't go dry. So when people pump them, there was the 2 tanks. You want to pump the trash tank, and then the tank that this is in, you want to only pump it down to until it's about, the water level's about right here. You don't want this thing to go dry. That's another thing that kills it. So I wasn't meaning this video to be like informative, really. Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, but it's more opinionated. So I just wanted to throw that in there if someone's watching this video trying to figure out if they want to get into BioBarriers or have a BioBarrier or anything. So I just want to be clear on that. There's 3 ways, 3 ways to really kill it. There's probably a lot more, but those are the 3 ways that I'm going over. Okay, so like I said, I was going to take this thing apart and let's take a look more in detail on it. There was a couple things I was wrong about. So this isn't a discharge. This is what I saw referred to as a clean in place. I'm guessing that you would open this up and send water down to try to flush it out. And then this one is the discharge. So I mean, that's not really a big deal, but I just want to clear that up. Looks like there's a little on-off valve here too. And then when I pulled this thing out of here, it's actually pretty heavy. So, and the way that I heard about pulling them out of there, because I was talking about you don't want it to go dry, whoever pulls these out is supposed to have like some sort of an aquarium system where you pull this out and you put it into an aquarium to keep it wet. So that's something I want to add. And then this, I believe this is for if you had like a hoist system to put a tripod over top to crank it out. I was able to lift it, and then I also was looking at this. So this is just an aluminum angle. I don't think that's a good idea to use something like that, because aluminum in a corrosive environment such as a septic, because septics have hydrogen sulfide gas, and that eats away at this kind of stuff. And you can already see it. It's started there. It's called rusting. A lot of people only think of rust when it comes to steel, but aluminum rusts too. It just in a different way. So eventually this would turn to powder and just crumble. So I don't really know why they're using aluminum to hold this thing up. It should have been stainless or a composite. So yeah, I'm gonna take it apart. I suppose I'm gonna take all this stuff off. I don't know if I'll really film that. And then it looks like I could take this worm clamp off and pull this piece off. I suppose I could just set the camera over and just film like that. Another reason I wanted to film this disassembly was because I wanted to talk about this. Because this isn't an informative video, so it's kind of personal. I was going to bring in some personal stuff on the installer. So I've actually known him a long time, and at one time we were friends, and that's kind of a funny story. So back when we were friends, he was always talking about this thing. He was talking about how he was going to be starting putting these in, and this was going to be the future and everything. And that was fine. At that time he was putting in septics just like me. Well, I don't know if he really was, because the thing about him is he was always at his shop. Like, his shop was up on a hill, and every time you drive by the garage door, you see his truck out front. I mean, not every time, but just about every time, he was always at his shop. So over the course of probably about a month, there was a major falling out. So as soon as he started putting these in, it's like he got this God complex, like he was better than everyone. So that there was other things that led up into this. So we had no problems, and one day he was telling me something. He was telling me about how his grandpa was a multi-millionaire, and telling me about how he was all self-made and all this and that. And so what that led to is some light bulbs started going off in my head. I'm looking at all this stuff he's got: a brand new truck, brand new this, brand new that, doing all this and that, and just bought this 40-acre industrial complex. And I'm like, I think I just figured something out. So, and he knew it. He could see that I just put it all together. I mean, what 36-year-old is a multimillionaire, self-made? I'm not doubting that there is some people that made a lot of money by that age, but the majority of people do not become a self-made millionaire until they're very old. And that's just kind of the way the world is. It's really not that easy. I think I gotta take all these screws out of the top. But anyway, back to the story. So, he's telling me how his grandpa's a self-made millionaire, and he knew I figured it all out at that point. And so I started asking, like, what happened to your grandpa's money? And he knew that I knew that he inherited it. That's no big deal. That a lot of people get started in life and have a really good life by inheriting, and good for them. But he wants the world to think that he's self-made and no one ever helped him. So he started telling me this story how someone changed the will. And that's not even the most interesting part. So he's telling me that this guy changed the will, and I guess he beat the guy's ass and went to jail and all this and that. And of course, later I tried to look that up, because when something like that happens, you can usually find evidence of it, which I never did. But so back to the story, he's telling me this, and then he's telling me how, because I was asking him, oh, well, what happened to this guy? What happened to him? And he tells me, well, this guy, he's 6 feet under now, but I don't want to talk about that. Kind of smirked. So basically, he pretty much told me that he killed the guy. I mean, he tried to insinuate that, so he's a murderer, supposedly. And that's just listening to the story, hearing myself talk about it, it sounds so stupid, and that's what I thought at the time too. And of course, I think he just made that all up because he wanted to try to cover his tracks, because and I suppose everyone would know in this world that you can't just change a will. If someone tried that, it would be wrapped up in litigation for decades. If it didn't get resolved immediately, it would be wrapped up in litigation, and it would end up being in litigation so long that it would deplete all the inheritance anyway. So someone doesn't just change the will. So bottom line is, he inherited all his money from his grandpa, and good for him. But to me, that's not cool to tell people that you're all self-made. And because to me, that encourages people, and encouragement's good. Everyone, if you want to start a business and try something to make money, that's great, you should try it. But to try to convince people that by the age of 36 you're a multimillionaire because you started this business, it's just, you would get other people into trouble, because other people would think that it's all going to work out just like that for them, and chances are it's probably not. That's just the way it is. People that are self-made, it doesn't happen quick. It happens over a lifetime, and by the time you're an actual millionaire, you're probably 60 or 70 years old. So I just hate for people to be led on like that. That's my point with that story, but there's a whole lot more to it. So like I was saying, this all took place over the course of about a month, the whole falling out. And during that time, he claimed that he had dug up a half a dozen of my septic systems. So 6 of my septics. So I say, well, which ones? And he wouldn't tell me. He said, well, which ones did you put in wrong? I'm like, none. So anyway, it kind of went off there, and he was getting pretty upset and didn't have time for this. He had 70 septics to put in. So that goes back to the thing about how he's always sitting at a shop, never doing anything. So at this time, it was like, I think it was August. So you got September or October and maybe some November. No, it was late August, so it was more like September and October. So 70 septics over the course of 2 months. That's like 35 septics per month, and there's typically like 30 days in a month. So apparently he was putting in like 1.25 septics per day for 2 months. And that's such a joke too, because you can't work like that. So I had called the health department, and I said, hey, this guy, he said he's dug up half a dozen of my septic systems. Do you know anything about that? And I talked to John there. He didn't know nothing about it. Never heard anything about him digging up a bunch of septics. And then I asked him, well, he said he's putting in 70 septics over the next few months. And John says, well, not around here, he's not. So I started asking about it, and he's like, I got 3 septic permits on my desk I'm looking into. None of them are his. He's not putting in any. Because, I started thinking about it. It's like, okay, so 70 septics in 2 months. What about all the months before that? What about March, April, May, June, July, August? What about those 6 months? Was he averaging 35 septics each of those months too? I mean, that's so ridiculous sounding. And the thing about putting in volume of septic, so back during the housing boom, like in the early 2000s, my company put in the most septics in 1 year. And as far as I know, we still have that record, and that record was like 53 in a year. You know, so he's putting in 70 every 2 months, and I'm not gonna do that math, but I mean, that's got to be like 200 for a year or something like that to do that many over the course of the rest of the year. So it was just kind of ridiculous. But we ended up having a big falling out, and he claimed he was going to sue me and I was going to go to prison and this and that. He demanded to know which septics I put in wrong, and of course it was none. But that's kind of where that went. And the thing that really, I keep saying that the thing, but because it was a lot of things, the main thing that really pisses me off about him is he gets into the installer magazines, and I read these articles and it's just bullshit. Like he puts in there that he tries to help people get started in the septic business, and that's absolute bullshit, because someone came to me wanting me to help him get a license, which I did help him, and he did get his license. But he asked this other guy first because he worked for him briefly, and he put in this garbage, and he'll tell you this is garbage, and everyone that he helped put in, he had to go back and work on it constantly because they're garbage. But he told me he asked for help to get his license, and the guy just blew him off and didn't want to help him. So it's such bull that he would claim that he's like this great person that wants to see other people put in septics, and that's just not true, because that's exactly what he doesn't want. And he made that clear to me, that he was the only one smart enough in the entire county to put in septics. That was his words, and more or less than those exact words, but it was something similar to that. But he was the only one qualified to put in septics in the county. No one else should be doing it, only him. And I don't know, it's just, I was thinking about that a lot, and I wanted to talk about that because, you know what, you go through life and you make up stories and you say things about people, it's going to come back. It's going to come back to you, and it should. So moral of the story is, don't bullshit and don't talk about people, and don't think you're better than everyone, because you're probably not. But yeah, that's just what I want to say about that. So next, I'm going to try to pull these out and see what they look like. I've got the bioreactor all taken apart, and here is the inside of it, the membrane plates, whatever you want to call them. I took it outside and I did hose it off because it was pretty nasty, and me touching it, you shouldn't do this. I mean, I'm just doing this for filming purposes. I'm gonna go wash my hands afterwards, but it was just easier for me to do this way so I could show it. But so how this works is the effluent would come in from this side. It would go through these membranes into the interior of this plate. I believe that this is kind of like, these are channels in between there, so it would pass through the membrane and then into the channel, and then into here, and it will collect and be pumped up and out. But let's look at these. So I already looked at them a little bit, and you can, right here, you can see all the tearing, and that kind of feeds to the theory on these just getting torn up by the turbulence of the air within. And you could say that maybe this is happening because you're allowed to dry out, but I would think that if that were the case, this entire membrane would be all cracked and crumbling, not just isolated areas of it. But so I mean, that's pretty much it. There's really nothing I can do with this. I was hoping I wouldn't find any damage, and then I could repopulate the bacteria, put it back together, and then sell it for $6,000. No, I wouldn't do that. But I actually might try to save some of this bacteria and not repopulate it, but just save it. So I think what I'll do is I'll take a sample, and then I'll start growing it in petri dishes. It's not going to really go anywhere from that, because to actually try to repopulate this, you would need to isolate the bacteria, and that's a little bit more complicated. And how you would do that is you would start by putting the sample on a petri dish, and then that petri dish, I'd have to make a bunch of agar petri dishes, but that's not a big deal. I do that not all the time, but quite a bit. But you would populate the bacteria in a petri dish. You would put it in an incubator, let it grow, and then when it grows out just a little bit, you would take a clean sample from it and move that to another petri dish, and then you would let that petri dish populate, and then you would take a sample from that and let it populate. You do that a few times until you get a kind of clean sample, and then at that point you would take a sample out of it and you would put it in a vial, and that vial would go into a centrifuge, which I don't have a centrifuge, and I probably won't buy one for this purposes. I mean, I would love to have one, but and you can get them for like $300, but for me, I don't really need one. But anyway, back to the process. You would put it in the centrifuge, you would spin it, and the centrifuge, it spins it around, so everything ends up getting separated by weight. Everything has a different weight, so, and it's not perfect like it would, so you would try to separate it that way, and then you would take a sample out of your vial, and then you repeat the petri dish process. You would grow it out, grow it out, grow it out, and then back to the centrifuge. You do that a whole bunch until you got a clean sample, because, you know, just trying to take a sample out of a vial like that, you're gonna get contamination of other types of bacteria. But you would do that for a while, and that's how you would isolate the strains of bacteria. And to do that, it realistically takes months, maybe even years. That's why it's not really viable for me to try to do something like that in a small scale in my basement. Plus, there's no point to doing it. But I will take a sample, or I'll take multiple samples, and I will try to grow them on petri dishes. You know, whether I'll try to isolate anything in primitive ways, probably not. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I mean, this is really the end of the video. There's nothing left for me to do. I mean, I took it apart to look inside. You know, that's what's inside, and that's pretty much it. I was just hosing this out before I put it back together, and I forgot I didn't go over this blower system. So this is where it blows the air in, then it goes down through there and ends up in the bottom, and then there's all these diffusers down here that would distribute the air across all this and up and through the membrane. So I just wanted to add that into there, and then I want to add one more thing. You know, I'm sure a rep for biomicrobics will end up watching this video, and you know, it's not really a knock at you or your company. I mean, I'm sure that this is probably one of the early designs, and maybe everything has been hammered out or ironed out with the process, and those membranes are lasting longer. But it was more about, you got to be careful who you get to represent your product. If you get a real shady character out here pushing these, they're gonna get a bad rap from that. I mean, just because, you know, this doesn't work right, I'm sure it could be fixed. But when you got someone out there selling these the way he does, you know, almost forcing people to get them, that's a big deal. So I'm sure that whoever from biomicrobics that watches this is going to be able to figure out who I'm talking about. You might want to look into who you got repping these a little better. Do a little bit better job of vetting your distributors. The end.